everybody, and welcome back to another Fairview Church podcast. I'm your host, John Spallino, and today we have Pastor Devin here on the channel to talk about budgeting. We have entitled this episode, Who Talks About a Budget in December?
It's a great question.
If you're like my family, you're up in the kind of the holiday spirit. Sometimes you can spend a little extra that you may not want to spend. And then you get to January and you're like, oh my word, that was a very expensive month. So we're going to be talking about a budget now because normally people start talking about budgets, resolutions, those types of things in January. But it's really good to think about it, especially in a season where we tend to have or can tend to have some more frivolous kind of spending.
Yeah, it's important when you feel the pinch to understand why you're feeling that pinch and maybe try to put in some best practices to maybe combat that in the future. Because newsflash, every year, without fail, Christmas happens December 25th. And it ought not surprise us, but it often does.
Yeah.
So,
well, hey, I've asked Pastor Devin to come on to the podcast, just guide us through some good practices, just financially, as as we kind of walk through not only this season, but just in general throughout life, just some good practice when it comes to finances and how, as followers of Christ, we can be faithful and good stewards and those sorts of things.
Yeah. Well, to start with, a budget is just like a lot of good things to have in place. It's all about planning ahead, trying to foresee as much as possible the things that you are fairly confident are coming about, and then planning appropriately. So you can apply that principle to many parts of your life, but specifically with the budget, it's good to plan your budget ahead of time before the month starts. And the sort of strategy that I like to employ, that I employ in my personal life and that I promote other people, is a zero-based budget. And what that means is basically on paper every month before the month begins is you're spending every dollar on paper before it actually starts. So that means you're planning ahead. You're first saying, hey, I know rent or my mortgage payment is this much. That's a line item on your budget. I'm going to be, I've prayerfully considered with my spouse, we feel compelled that our tithe is this amount that we give to our church. So that goes in a budget line before the month begins. And then you just work your way down through all the things that it takes to run your household, your utilities, car insurance, all of those things, even your entertainment things. You're going to decide ahead of time, hey, we're only going to spend about this much on eating out this month. And what that does, it kind of unlocks things. If nothing else, a lot of times when you get on a strict budget, not that it's supposed to be in any way limiting you, you're setting it. So you're getting to decide ahead of time on purpose what you're going to spend your money on. And that's very empowering for a lot of people. And again, it can be fluid. There can be adjustments made, but to have a starting goal, a starting plan will only free you up. And so that's kind of the first principle, the zero-based budgeting principle, where you are planning out every dollar that's coming in, where it's going to go. Now, I do want one caveat. I said we're spending every dollar. Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to, I've got to go out to the store and blow all of my money. No, spending could be, we're going to put X amount towards savings this month because we are saving for a car or a vacation, or maybe we're putting this much towards debt, so we're trying to pay that down. So it speaks to kind of a broader viewpoint of your life of having goals that you're going for and then planning effectively to try and meet those goals. So keeping all those things in mind, I just advocate for this zero-based budgeting principle.
Yeah, it sounds like having a plan is better than not having a plan. So I think of it, as you were talking, of when I go to the grocery store. If I don't have a list of things I need to buy, I tend to buy the things that I wasn't intended to buy, and I forget to buy the things I was supposed to buy. And so having a list, having goals, as you said, having where your money is going before you spend it, at least it gives you kind of like the parameters to work within. Yeah. And obviously, if you need to make adjustments mid-month or something happens, like car breaks down, you can divert, funds and those sorts of things. But it allows for at least there a plan to be had, so you're not just walking blindly through the month, just throwing money everywhere and
Absolutely.
having no accountability.
And that kind of speaks towards the second part of this, the actual executing of the budget. So it's important to have the plan, to have that in place before the month begins. But as you go through the month, actually recording the expenses you have and applying that against those budget lines, so you keep a real-time kind of check to know where you are in those budget lines. And to be honest, when you first start this, we're all going to be terrible at it. It's going to take many months to do this before you become effective at it. But press on, push through. As you record those expenses, you'll get to see your spending patterns. And maybe kind of a bonus thing to consider before you get into this is to maybe look at your bank statements from previous months and kind of map out what you have spent. That's going to be pretty eye-opening to begin with. You know, a lot of people will suddenly realize, wow, I spent that much at restaurants in a month. Maybe we ought to dial that back because we're having trouble paying this bill over here, and I might have just found where that problem might be. So yeah, maybe take some time looking through old bank statements to see where things are, so you can have at least a starting point to budget from. And then again, it'll still take a couple of months to find a good flow, to see how things are allocated, so that it's at least somewhat close to reality. And then one important thing I want to throw in there too, the importance of having a miscellaneous budget line. Now, what you have to promise me is not to just make your whole budget miscellaneous, because then it just defeats the purpose. But we're going to have, the kids have some function at school, or we have to do a registration fee, or we're renewing our tags, like those little ankle biter things that don't happen every month but are somewhat cyclical. Those always pop up and can really throw things off. So having an adequate miscellaneous line is very helpful to kind of catch those things you just don't remember right off the top of mind.
Yeah. So resources then for how to do that.
Yeah.
So like if you're trying to write down stuff, I mean, are there any good ways to do that? Any resources available to help?
Yeah. I mean, bare minimum, a yellow pad, just writing it all out. That's a way to do it. People have done that for years. If you want to step up and go into a digital world, there are, spreadsheets that you can use. There are plenty of templates out there that are free. I actually advocate for the EveryDollar app. I use that for our family to track our expenses and set our budget every month, excuse me. And so EveryDollar is great. There's lots of other things like the You Need a Budget app. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones, but there are plenty out there. Probably too many. Really what you need to do is pick one, stick to it for a while, learn the quirks of it, and then just continue to modify it.
Cool. And just a little note here. One thing that I normally find myself surprised at when looking at budgets is all those subscriptions that we have. They go up every year, and I just don't pay attention because, it goes up by $1.
Yeah.
How big of a difference does that make? But I'll sometimes go back to these, like, when did it get to be like $13 a month or something like that? When like Spotify, for example, it's $13.13.
Mm-hmm.
When I started Spotify, it was like $8, or something like that. So, just checking back on some of those subscriptions, looking at how many, I think is a fair way to kind of assess what your family may need or wants in that season. Could save quite a bit of money. Yeah,
no, you're right. And the benefit of tracking expenses real time is you see that, and it's like, okay, that's costing me this much per month. And then along those lines, because you're seeing the entire financial picture, you're having to make the choices of what you're going to prioritize with what is effectively God's money that He's entrusted you to steward and shepherd properly. And so you can take a look at those things. A lot of those apps will break things down by percentage. You'll say, man, I've got a lot of lifestyle related fluff in there, and I'm not giving maybe as much as I'd like to. So maybe the adjustment needs to be made. And along those lines, I do want to advocate also. It's typical in most marriages, most families, there is someone who kind of thrives with this kind of nerdy stuff, and maybe someone who's more free-spirited and does it. But it is important that the two of you, whoever's making up that household, discuss these things and come to an agreement about them. What this is going to do is allow you as a family to align with your goals and values and where you're trying to get financially. And again, that entry point we're just talking about money here, but it can affect so many other categories of life. It's opening, communication lines with you and your spouse. And again, financial issues are a huge stressor in marriages. So in any way that we can bring about peace and unity in such a difficult topic, it's going to breathe life into other areas as well.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, just from my personal experience, when Amber and I first got married, EveryDollar had to have approval. Okay, so like if it was like we were gonna stop and grab a soda, now I gotta call her because money was very tight.
Sure.
As we've gotten older and started saving a little bit more, it can go maybe like $5 without
Sure.
getting approval. But when it comes to communication? When you have a couple, when you have marriages, let's just say you have a marriage who is working towards debt, for example, what is the best way for them to start really trying to tackle some of that debt? Like what's some good practices?
Sure. Well, I think there's two parts there. So the first is like, what do you need permission for to spend? I want to answer that question first. And really that's up to the couple to decide, but you need to decide it. You need to have the conversation. Say like, hey, for some folks, like maybe you each have your own dedicated line item. You have this much that you can spend on what you want in the month. Now that's all coming from ideally a joint checking account. We're all playing from the same pool of money because we're a family and we're married and we're one flesh and all of those things. But you have this dedicated amount. Or if you want to say, hey, if we're going to spend above $50 or at least make it a phone call to see what's going on, to make sure that we're aligned in our values and our goals in those purchases. Now, with regard to if we're wanting to attack debt, I would always suggest to start before anything else, you need to have at least a starter emergency fund, $1,000. And that might be more money than anybody's ever had in their checking account, which is understandable. Or it might be like, yeah, that's not enough. Well, you're right. It's not enough. That's not going to solve a tremendous car issue, but at least it's going to give you a little distance. It's going to give you, a new tire. If you blow a tire out, you can pay for that without going backwards in your debt journey.
Sure.
So getting that into place, and then again, aligning yourself with your spouse, like, hey, we're going hard after this. So maybe we're going to dial back some of the lifestyle spending because our goal, our value is to get this debt, get these payments that are kind of sucking us dry, get those out of life. It's worth the temporary pain of doubling down on those things for the greater freedom that's going to come when that's all out of the way.
Now, let me ask you two questions on this. One of them is probably a good question. The other one is putting you on the spot. Okay. So the first question is, from a Christian perspective, you already mentioned that it's God's money. So why should we care about protecting our money and using our money as for being good stewards and those sorts of things? And then second, the question is going to be, if I have debt and I need to double down on it, does that mean that I don't need to give to the Lord's kingdom purposes in that season?
Okay. Well, let me do my best to answer both of those. Okay. So the first one was,
why do we do it?
Yeah. Why do we do? Why do we? So we consider it God's money. We're recognizing that God is the source of all provision, and so there is a mentality that ought to be adopted in my mind that we are simply stewarding this. We're not. It's not ours. It's His, and so we need to treat it as if that's the case. Just take a look at the way that you manage your money now. Consider you were doing that on behalf of an employer. Like that was your job, was to manage your money. Do you think you'd be fired? Some of us probably should be with how we manage our funds. The reality is, it is all God's that He has entrusted us with. And so we need to be faithful in how we manage and steward and shepherd that well.
And it's an act of worship as well.
Absolutely. That's not to say that it's not okay to have fun with our money, with the money that He's entrusted with us. That's part of it. There is the enjoyment of it. But there's also maybe some potential consequences we're having to catch up with. Namely, if we're, in debt, in a overburdensome way that we can't do the things in the kingdom that we'd like to or ought to, or we can't provide the necessary things for our families that we're entrusted to care for as well. And that leads to the second question. And really, that's going to be between you and the Lord working through that. I've heard testimonies of both types of people of, hey, we're going to do everything, even so much as we're not giving during this time because we're focusing on this. Again, I'm just going to trust the Spirit of God within you to convict you on that or say you should or shouldn't do that. I always advocate for people to continue to be generous even through the process because it's allowing you to take part in kingdom work even in the midst of your struggle. Rather than having to give every extra dollar to a debtor or to a creditor, still being to play, to be in the work with the people financially that you're in kingdom work with at your local church body. So there's not a good, I think, one size fits all. I would always advocate for continuing to whatever you and your spouse determines is, would fulfill that responsibility you feel that you have. Whatever you do it in unity with your spouse.
Sure. That's good. That's a good answer.
Well, it's very diplomatic, I guess. But.
I know. I threw it out there. I thought it fit well. So now we're talking about saving, budgeting, any other practical kind of things for us that you have?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate for just having a plan, and the particular plan that I subscribe to is the Ramsey plan. If some of you are aware of Financial Peace University with Dave Ramsey, I always advocate for that because it's very simple and it works if you are dedicated to doing it. It hits all these things. You're giving regularly, faithfully. You're saving for things. You're getting rid of debt that could be limiting you and the effects that you could have in the world around you. And then also this future view of, determining whether or not we want to help assist our kids with their college, and then also, unless the Lord comes, unless the kingdom becomes fully, we're all going to have to provide for ourselves in retirement. Mm-hmm. So having that long range view in mind of, okay, what sort of quality of life will I have available to me when I'm done working?
Sure.
It's important to have that. And what I enjoy about that Ramsey baby step process is it kind of lays it out in a pretty understandable way, even I can understand it, with actionable steps of how to do it. So I'd be happy to engage with anybody kind of on a one-to-one if they have more questions about that. And also we are happy to provide as a church family Financial Peace University to anyone who's seriously interested in diving into that. Again, see me, email me, we'll be happy to get you set up with that.
So the benefits of budgeting, while there obviously are practical elements to it, some of the extra benefits, as we've kind of talked, are communication with your spouse, hopefully a healthier environment, to talk about finances,
Yep.
and hopefully it's helping better marriages because of it. We're talking about worshiping the Lord with being good stewards of our finances. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason why is because whenever we are indebted to creditors, we do hear of needs that we may want to give to, but we just can't.
Yeah.
Right? And so we're able to be more generous when we have had some self-control in some areas, and then really thinking through our future, right? Of the $5 that I'm spending now could be $5 that I need when I'm 80 years old,
Yeah.
right? And kind of thinking through what that looks like. And so it's allowing us to then have some maybe financial freedom in the future by being a little bit more self-controlled now and disciplined now
Yeah.
in how we spend our money. Not only that, we talked on providing for your family and making sure you have what's necessary because life ain't cheap. At least it seems like the older kids get, the more expensive it becomes. Whether it's as you mentioned, fees and those types of things. And so hopefully having a good budget, it's not just about saving money. It hits all these avenues of life that allow us to be better, faithful, fathers. Yeah. It helps us to be better, faithful, husbands and wives and all these different things. It helps us be better versions of ourselves because we are showing discipline in an area. And then obviously all that gives, glory to the Lord that we are taking kind of control of this area of life. Yeah. That can sometimes be so chaotic and so challenging.
Absolutely. And what you just said just brought a couple things to mind. One thing I wanted to share, with the having of the plan and executing these things, you can see on paper, okay, we're doing this for our retirement. We've moved the needle this far. in our debt to get freedom from that. We have things at least rolling for kids' education and everything. What that does is you see, okay, I'm checking the big boxes in my life financially. And that and also I'm being generous. I'm giving to my church. I'm funding missions work and these sorts of things. It allows you then to enjoy some of the fruits of your labor, some of the extra maybe God has given you, with more freedom, because you're like, okay, I'm doing the things I'm responsibly acting here. Okay, so I ought not feel bad or guilty if it's in the budget to go and to do these things, and that's enjoyable. And so there's great freedom that is accessible if you manage your money well. And again, just one further encouragement: we're all bad at this. We're all bad at just about anything when we first try it. But I want people to hear, hey, keep going, keep trying, ask questions, get help, but push through, because regardless of what your financial picture looks like, it can be better with a plan than without.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Any last minute remarks before we close this podcast down?
Oh, I'm sure there's lots. But again, if you have any further questions about this, predominantly you see me leading worship on a Sunday morning, doing music stuff, but this is a huge heartbeat of my ministry here at Fairview Church as well, as to assist people with these types of things. So please reach out. Happy to engage with anyone who might have further questions or need help with this.
Wonderful. Well, with that, I hope everyone has a wonderful Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Budgeting during Christmas season. But hey, you know what? We talk about some flexibility here. So you know what? Enjoy your time with your family. If you need to buy that extra cannoli, just go ahead and do it. It's okay. Well, according to your own budget.
Right.
That'll come out of my own personal fund as that
There
extra
you go.
cannoli.
Absolutely.
But anyways, have a wonderful Christmas, and we're excited about the next half of the season that's coming up in January.
Good stuff coming.
And it's gonna be wonderful. So thank you for spending at least this semester with us, everybody. This podcast will be back in January.
Here it comes.
And it's gonna be awesome. So thanks for being here, Devin.
Thank you, Pastor Jon.
All right. Be blessed.
Bye.